if we're honest with ourselves, all of us have to admit that each of us has a particular weakness in our personality. I won't go so far as to say a flaw, because it means something different in psychology, but a particular weakness. If you think about it, Shakespeare's character, Hamlet had a particular weakness that was his downfall. Remember the great speech he gave, to be or not to be. That expressed his weakness. He was indecisive, couldn't make up his mind, couldn't say yes or no. And if the flaw is unchecked, as it was in Hamlet, it can lead to our ultimate undoing, especially spiritually, not to mention different aspects of our lives. One of my flaws tends to be that I expect things to follow a proper order, or at least the order that I think that they should follow. That you should line up for things in an orderly fashion. I guess we get this from the British. They say you have to queue up. And if I see that not happening, I get upset. Now, this became aggravated when I had to go to live in Italy to study there. And I'm not saying anything bad about anybody that's Italian or anything like that. Part of my family are from Italy, but from the northern part. But anyway, I just remember having to try to line up for something, and everybody hurried in a rush to get to the front of the line, pushing and shoving, and I was getting impatient and aggravated with them. And then I took a train there for the first time, and everybody was getting up in the train. Back then they had those compartments, and there was an aisleway that we had here long ago in the United States, and people were getting up and lining up in the way, and they were taking their suitcases down in bags. And I thought, well, I guess the train's going to arrive at the place. And one of the priests that was with me, who had been there longer, said, "Sit down. We're not there yet." I said, "What do you mean, sit down? Everybody's lining up and getting in line." He said, "You'll see what's happening." So about 20 minutes later, the train finally arrived where it was supposed to go, and people were still shoving to get off of it. Now, I bring that up just as an example, because when I began to think about why I was getting upset, while there's no excuse for people pushing and shoving, what really aggravated me was that my own pride was hurt. I was really doing what I blamed everybody else for doing. I was thinking that I was more important than them. What I had to do was more important. And the impatience that I was experiencing was because I wasn't put at the center of things. It was my own egoism, not just simply the other people rushing to get out of the train or get ahead of in the line. There's also a line in Shakespeare that says, "Our fault lies not in our stars, but in ourselves." Our fault lies not in our stars, but in ourselves. If we want to see where our faults are, look at our own selves, not look at other things around us or the world of nature or the horoscope or anything like that. Now, I remember reading a stupid story. Bear with me on this, but I think it's a funny story. It was in one of those priest magazines that we used to get, and it was about a situation in an airport. Now, the situation was probably true, but it took place at a time when you used to have to check in. Some of you will remember that. Well, you couldn't do it online. You had to actually go to the airport, go to a human being, check in with the person, and you would get your seat assigned to you, and so on and so forth. Well, evidently, and you can experience this now with flights being canceled or delayed and so on and so forth. But anyway, the situation was this. There was a panic in this small airport. A flight had been canceled, and the line was slowly moving to get checked in onto another plane. Now, there was a man there who was probably a government official or somebody who thought himself very, very important, and he was getting annoyed to have to wait in this line. So finally, he pushed everybody aside and marched up to the counter, and he demanded a first-class ticket on the next available flight to wherever he was going. I don't know. But the woman behind the counter got just as angry, and she said, "Look, sir, I have to serve the people in line in the turn in which they're in line." Now, the man got angrier, and he banged his fist on the counter, and he said, "Lady, "Do you have any idea who I am?" And without a moment's hesitation, the woman looked at him, angry just as he was, and she picked up the microphone for the airport, and she announced out loud, "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, there's a man here who doesn't know who he is. If anybody in the airport can identify him, please come forward and take him away." Now the people, you're laughing, but the people in the line supposedly burst into applause, and the angry line jumper was embarrassed. Now really, if you think about it, the original sin is pride. It underlies all of the other things, other sins that we commit in one way or another. Egoism, thinking and acting, even if at times we're unconscious of this, even if at times we're unreflected of it, we don't do it explicitly, thinking and acting that we're the center of reality, that we're the center of all things. This is really a serious spiritual and a practical life and problem. If it's exaggerated, we have an exaggerated opinion of ourselves. It can lead to all kinds of difficulties. Now, that egoism can be unconscious, but it can cause us, if you think about it, think about incidents in your own life, it can cause us to ignore the dignity, the importance, and the value of other people that we encounter in life. When we act as if we're the center of the universe, we can often abuse and use other people in the process. That's why I say it's the original sin. It's at the center of what we have in our society, what St. John Paul II described as a culture of death. Other people, even the most defenseless and helpless, even unborn children in society, can be sacrificed, simply put out of the way for personal expediency. There's a tendency in the movement to eliminate people who are terminally ill, those with special needs, those who are physically disabled or handicapped, whatever other category you can think of or situation in life that people are in special cases of special need on our behalf to help them, sometimes are made to suffer. They suffer because of the egoism, selfishness, or self-centeredness of other people, even people like ourselves. There was another story that I read in a newspaper. This is a long time ago. It was about a young woman. She was 26 years old, and she was attempting, unfortunately, to commit suicide. She was going to throw herself off of a 160-foot bridge. Now, the problem was that in her attempt on this, now she did fall off the bridge, but she did survive. But anyway, when she was attempting to commit suicide and people were trying to talk her down from the bridge, it caused a large traffic jam as the rescue workers tried to talk her down. Now, some people were stalled in the jam for about 3 hours. And sadly, many people were yelling and screaming at her, cursing at her, calling for her to just jump off so that they could all get by. It's very, very sad. But it's an example of what I'm talking about. We're all aware of ourselves doing this sometimes, self-centeredness and egoism at the expense of other people. Now, the article went on, in the newspaper article, some of the people in the traffic jam who did do this, who exhibited this type of behavior, they later were sorry for what they did, tried to make amends for it. Now, I bring this up because the point of Jesus in the gospel story today, he's not giving a lesson about social etiquette, manners, as we would call it in the past. His insistence is on humility. Humility. And humility is not an option for us who would be his disciple. Humility really is nothing different than what the philosopher Socrates said. Know yourself. Humility is truth, according to the ancient Romans. Humility is not the same thing as being humbled by another person or being humiliated, as they say. Rather, humility is to realize and see ourselves as we really are. For us who believe, to see ourselves as God sees us. It doesn't mean demeaning ourselves. Doesn't mean denying our true gifts and talents. That's false humility. That's really a lie. The same thing is exaggerating ourselves. Dishonest pride is as bad as self-demeaning because we are failing to see ourselves as we really are, and ultimately failing to see ourselves as God sees us. True humility that Jesus is getting at is to know ourselves in an honest way. That's the point of the first reading from that book of Sirach in the Old Testament. It says not to seek what is too sublime for us. What that means is not to reach for things that are beyond our strength, beyond our ability, to be honest with ourselves. True humility, it allows us to see things as they really are, because it allows us to know ourselves as we really are, and then to see and respect others for who they are and what they really are. To be a disciple, it means to see ourselves as Jesus sees us, and to see other people as Jesus himself sees them, to see really through to the truth of things. True humility allows us to do that. In our case as the disciples, it means to put Jesus before all else. And to do that, we have to decentralize our own egos, take ourselves from the center of the universe, and truly, if we want to do that, to place Jesus there. To place him at the center is to truly be humble. It also allows us to see him in other people, to treat other people that we encounter in life as somebody with whom Jesus has identified himself, especially those who are the least among us. This is the point of Jesus tries to make in the Gospel of St. Matthew. In chapter 25, we're all familiar with the scene of the Last Judgment. That's the judgment scene painted by Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel above the high altar, where the cardinals go up to place their vote for the Pope. Jesus says, "Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you do unto me." He identifies himself with them. To overcome selfishness or egoism or self-centeredness, for us as disciples, is to place Jesus at the center, to see him in other people who enter our lives. In the prayer after communion, after we receive Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, the prayer prays this: "Lord, stir us to serve you in our neighbor. Stir us to serve you in our neighbor." True humility leads us to do that, stirs us to serve Jesus in our neighbor. So true humility means recognizing the gifts and talents that we have, valuing ourselves for who we really are in truth, and thanking God for that. But it also means seeing the face of Jesus in others, especially those who are least that we encounter in life, those who are defenseless, those who are vulnerable, those who our society unfortunately would seek to eliminate. It means even seeing Jesus in those who make things difficult for us, those who jump in front of us in a line. But it means all those who are needy in any way. Could be the person next to us, in front of us, behind us. Doing that is not an easy thing to do, but it means to be a disciple, to truly follow Jesus. To truly do that, each of us needs to decentralize ourselves and focus on Jesus and others, especially those who are similar to that group of people that Jesus talks about in the Gospel: the poor, the cripple, the lame, the blind. Those are the people that Jesus speaks about. He's asking you and I to invite them into our lives simply by showing them mercy, kindness, and compassion. And as he says, ultimately it will allow him one day to repay us at the resurrection of the righteous.